Chosen one, this message is not ordinary, and you did not find it by accident. You were led here because something has already started shifting in the unseen, and your spirit has been trying to warn you before your mind could fully catch up. Someone is about to apologize to you. Yes, the words are forming already. Yes, the message is closer than you think. Yes, the person who once wounded you, ignored your value, mishandled your heart, dismissed your loyalty, or acted as if losing you meant nothing, is preparing to return with an apology. But listen to me carefully, chosen one, because this is where many people lose discernment. This apology is not coming for the reason you think it is. It is not as simple as regret. It is not as clean as healing. It is not as pure as sudden transformation. There is another reason behind it. And before this message is over, you are going to understand exactly what is happening, why it is happening now, and what you must never confuse when this person reaches back toward your life. I need you to stay with me all the way through this word, because the last part is where everything becomes clear. Do not rush ahead in your emotions. Do not let nostalgia start interpreting this before wisdom does. Do not let the part of you that once longed for closure make decisions before the healed part of you has had a chance to speak. Because someone is coming back with an apology. But the apology is not the miracle. The apology is the signal. The apology is the reveal. The apology is the evidence that something has caught up with them that they could not outrun forever. And if you are one of the chosen ones this message is for, then you already know what I mean when I say, there was always something in your spirit that told you this day would come. There was always something in you that said, one day they are going to see it. One day they are going to understand what they did. One day they are going to feel the weight of what they treated so lightly. Well, chosen one, that day is drawing near. For a long time, you carried the pain while they carried the appearance of freedom. You carried the questions while they carried on with life as if nothing had happened. You carried the broken trust, the silent overthinking, the late-night conversations with yourself, the private grief, the replaying of words, the replaying of moments, the replaying of the exact point where things shifted and the connection stopped feeling safe. Meanwhile, they looked fine. They looked detached. They looked unbothered. They looked as if they had moved on with ease. And that was one of the hardest parts for you, chosen one. It was not only that they hurt you, it was that they seemed untouched by the hurt they caused. It was that they walked away in a way that made you question whether what was sacred to you had ever been sacred to them at all. But this is the first thing I need you to understand. And if this part hits your spirit, hold on, because it only gets deeper from here. Appearances lie. Distance lies. Silence lies. The fact that someone looked at peace does not mean they were at peace. The fact that someone went quiet does not mean they forgot. The fact that someone kept moving does not mean they escaped consequence. There are people who smile while carrying disturbance. There are people who distract themselves because they cannot bear stillness. There are people who convince themselves they made the right decision, not because it was true, but because admitting the truth would break the image they built around their ego. And the person connected to this word has been living in more unrest than you realize. You see, chosen one, when someone has truly encountered your light, your sincerity, your loyalty, your depth, and your spiritual weight, they do not walk away from that and remain unchanged. They may resist it. They may mishandle it. They may rebel against it. They may devalue it while they still have access to it. But they do not leave untouched. And that is what this person did not understand when they chose pride over truth, ego over humility, convenience over covenant, distance over honesty, or control over accountability. They thought they were leaving a person. They did not realize they were stepping away from a grace they had not earned and a presence they did not know how to steward. They thought they were walking away from something ordinary. They thought they could replace your calm, replace your honesty, replace your depth, replace your prayers, replace your consistency, replace your genuine heart. They thought what you carried was common because they had constant access to it. But access has a way of hiding value from people who lack discernment. And now that access is gone, reality has started teaching them what your presence once covered for free. Let that settle into your spirit. Reality has started teaching them what your presence once covered for free. The peace they felt around you was not normal. The safety they felt around you was not basic. The emotional steadiness, the encouragement, the understanding, the grace, the listening ear, the spiritual covering, the patience, the kindness, the loyalty, the way you held space without asking to be praised for it, none of that was ordinary. It only looked ordinary because you carried it so naturally. But once it was removed, the difference became impossible to ignore. And that is where this apology begins. This apology is not beginning with words. It is beginning with discomfort. It is beginning with restlessness. It is beginning with an inner pressure that has become harder and harder for them to silence. Something is no longer sitting right inside them. Something they thought time would bury has started rising again. Something they thought would fade has returned with more force. They are replaying things now. They are remembering conversations differently now. They are hearing your words in a new way now. They are recognizing moments they overlooked. They are revisiting warnings they ignored. They are starting to see the exact places where they were careless with something sacred and called it normal because they were too blind, too immature, too distracted, or too proud to recognize the gift while it was still in their hands. That is why I am telling you, chosen one. This is not just about apology. This is about realization. This is about delayed recognition. This is about truth arriving late. And truth arriving late often creates a very emotional reaction in people who once operated without depth. Because once a person begins to see clearly what they did, one of two things happens. They either harden further and run from accountability, or they begin to crack under the weight of what they can no longer deny. The person tied to this message is beginning to crack. The version of the story they told themselves is no longer holding together. The excuses are not protecting their conscience the way they used to. The blame shifting is losing power. The distractions are wearing thin. And now they are standing face to face with a truth they once delayed. They mishandled someone they should have honored. Chosen one, hear me. This is not because you were perfect. It is because you were genuine. These channels always try to make the chosen one sound flawless. But the deeper truth is not perfection. The deeper truth is purity of intent. You loved with sincerity. You showed up with your whole heart. You extended patience. You gave more grace than most people even noticed. You were willing to communicate. You were willing to understand. You were willing to work through things honestly. And instead of being met there, you were mishandled, minimized, delayed, or taken for granted. So when this person comes back with an apology, do not let your mind translate that as, now they finally became worthy. No. First, understand what it actually means. It means truth has started pressing on them harder than pride can suppress it. And this is where the message gets sharper, so stay close. Because the reason they are about to apologize is not mainly your healing. That is the part many of you need to be prepared to hear. The apology may help you. It may validate what your spirit already knew. It may close a chapter that remained open in your mind longer than it should have. It may even bring a sense of release. But make no mistake, the first reason this apology is forming is because something in them wants relief. They are not only thinking about what happened to you, they are starting to feel what happened says about them. And that is a very different kind of pressure. There are people who do not apologize because they suddenly become noble. They apologize because they can no longer live comfortably inside the story they created about themselves. They want the tension to lift. They want the guilt to settle. They want the inner disturbance to stop tapping them on the shoulder in quiet moments. They want the memory of you to stop confronting them every time life sends them a counterfeit version of what you once gave with ease. They want to know whether a door is still cracked open. They want to know whether they still have some access, some influence, some path back into the space they carelessly exited. This is why I said at the beginning that this apology is not coming for the reason you think. Because if you think it is arriving solely because they have become profoundly transformed, you may read the moment incorrectly. And when chosen ones read a moment incorrectly, they call it destiny, when it was actually exposure. Yes, I said exposure. Because part of what is happening here is exposure. Exposure of their motives. Exposure of their delayed regret. Exposure of the fact that what they once called moving on was not healing. It was avoidance. Exposure of the fact that what they once called clarity was actually immaturity. Exposure of the fact that they did not understand your worth until life removed your presence and forced comparison on them. Exposure of the fact that many people only recognize depth when they have already traded it away. Exposure of the fact that some apologies are not doors opening to the future, but mirrors being held up to the past. Chosen one, if this is reaching you in the right hour, then you have probably already felt the stirring. Maybe their name has come up unexpectedly. Maybe old memories have surfaced out of nowhere. Maybe you have been sensing someone watching from a distance. Maybe your dreams have been strange lately. Maybe you felt an energy around this person shift without any physical contact at all. Maybe you suddenly had that feeling, that quiet inner knowing that something unresolved was moving again. Do not dismiss that. Your spirit often senses movement before the natural realm confirms it. And in your case, something is indeed moving. But movement is not instruction. I need you to hear that. Movement is not instruction. Just because something stirs does not mean you are called to immediately respond. Just because an apology comes does not mean restoration is required. Just because someone returns with softer words does not mean they are returning with a different nature. This is why the next part matters so much. And this is where I need every chosen one listening to lean in even closer. Because the question is not simply, will they apologize? Yes, they will. The energy of it is already building. The deeper question is, why now? Why after all this time? Why after the silence? Why after the distance? Why after you stopped chasing understanding? Why after you finally started healing? Why after you built yourself back in the places they helped break? Why now? And the answer is this: because something has shifted in their environment, in their emotional state, in their sense of control, and in the way reality is reflecting their own choices back to them. They are not apologizing in a vacuum. They are apologizing because life has become a mirror. For some of you, the mirror came through loss. For others, it came through failure. For others, it came through disappointment in another connection that made them realize what they once had. For others, it came through spiritual unrest, a collapse of distraction, a humbling season, or a pattern finally repeating on them in a way that forced empathy. However it came. And now they are being confronted with something they avoided for a long time. The understanding that what they did cannot be romanticized, minimized, or endlessly justified. They know now that they crossed a line. They know now that they mishandled a real one. They know now that they were operating from immaturity, selfishness, fear, pride, emotional laziness, or unresolved wounds of their own. They may not yet have language for all of it, but they feel it. And because they feel it, they are being pushed toward an apology. But do not miss this, chosen one. Being pushed toward an apology is not the same thing as being ready to sustain change. I'm going to say that again, because this is one of the central truths of the whole message. Being pushed toward an apology is not the same thing as being ready to sustain change. A person can feel bad and still be unsafe. A person can cry and still be inconsistent. A person can miss you and still not know how to honor you. A person can speak truth in a moment and still fall back into old patterns the second the discomfort inside them is relieved. This is why wise chosen ones do not evaluate a return by intensity alone. They evaluate by fruit, by patience, by consistency, by accountability, by whether the person is trying to rebuild trust or simply trying to soothe themselves. And that brings us to the edge of what comes next. Because in the next part, I'm going to break down the exact hidden reasons behind this apology. Not the surface reason, not the excuse they may give, not the polished version, the hidden reasons, the ones underneath the words, the reasons they may not even fully admit to themselves yet. And once you hear them, you will never interpret a returning apology the same way again. Feng Hai Jin Nam, chosen one. Now we are entering the part most people never see clearly, because they are too focused on the apology itself to ask what is actually driving it. They hear the words, "I'm sorry," and immediately their heart starts filling in the blanks. They start imagining growth. They start imagining regret in its purest form. They start imagining that maybe, finally, this person has become who they should have been all along. But that is why discernment is so necessary in this hour. Because the apology is real, but the reason behind it is deeper, messier, and far more revealing than most people are prepared for. There are hidden motives underneath many apologies, and if you cannot sense what is beneath the words, you may misread the entire moment. The first hidden reason this person is coming back to apologize is because your absence became louder than your presence ever was. Let that sit with you. Your absence became louder than your presence ever was. When they had you, they normalized you. When they had access to your consistency, your loyalty, your calm, your patience, your emotional depth, your ability to genuinely care, they treated it as if it would always be there. They got used to your steadiness. They got used to your softness. They got used to your light. They got used to being understood by you, heard by you, supported by you, prayed for by you, and emotionally held by you. And because they were used to it, they started seeing it as ordinary. That is what people do when they have no discernment. They confuse constant access with low value. They confuse your consistency with commonness. They confuse your willingness to love with a lack of rarity. But once you were removed, the silence started talking. Now the places your presence once covered are exposed. Now the emotional gaps are visible. Now the cheap substitutes are obvious. Now the difference can be felt in conversations that do not go as deep, in connections that do not feel safe, in rooms that do not carry peace, in relationships that do not have grace, in interactions that feel transactional, unstable, shallow, or forced. What they once took for granted is now the standard they cannot stop measuring everything against. And this is why the apology is beginning to form. Because absence teaches what access often cannot. Your absence became a teacher. Your absence became a mirror. Your absence became the thing that finally forced them to ask, what was it that I actually lost? The second hidden reason they are apologizing is because guilt has started asking for relief. This is one of the hardest truths for chosen ones to accept, because the heart wants to believe the apology is centered on you. Sometimes part of it is, but many apologies are first centered on the person apologizing. They want relief from the discomfort. They want relief from the replaying thoughts. They want relief from the moments where your memory surfaces at inconvenient times. They want relief from the inner contradiction of trying to see themselves as good while knowing they acted carelessly with someone who did not deserve it. They want relief from the tension between who they say they are and what they actually did. And when that tension becomes too strong, people often reach for apology, not because they are fully transformed, but because they are tired of being haunted by what they cannot unknow. This is why I need you to understand the difference between an apology that is meant to free you and an apology that is meant to soothe them. Because there is a difference. One says, I need to tell the truth because you deserved better, and I am willing to take full ownership whether you receive me or not. The other says, I need to get this off my chest because I do not like how I feel carrying it. One is rooted in accountability. The other is rooted in emotional discomfort. One is prepared to lose access and still tell the truth. The other secretly hopes that honesty will reopen the door. And the person connected to this message is carrying more of that second energy than they may even realize. They want the weight to lift. They want to know if saying the words will change the atmosphere. They want to know if speaking now can soften what has been pressing on them. The third hidden reason this apology is surfacing now is because life has humbled them in a place where pride used to protect them. This is crucial. There was a season when pride was working for them. Pride helped them justify their behavior. Pride helped them avoid accountability. Pride helped them tell the story in a way that made them feel less guilty. Pride told them you were too sensitive, too demanding, too much, too intense, too difficult, or too emotional. Pride told them they had valid reasons for pulling away the way they did. Pride told them they were fine without you. Pride told them they would find better, easier, lighter, more convenient energy elsewhere. Pride gave them language to escape the truth. But pride only works until life begins to contradict it. And for this person, life has started contradicting the lie. Maybe things have not gone the way they expected. Maybe the people they ran toward did not carry what you carried. Maybe the attention they thought would satisfy them turned out to be empty. Maybe the connection they chose over truth gave them chaos instead of peace. Maybe the image they tried to maintain is cracking. Maybe their confidence has taken hits in other areas. Maybe their emotional life is not as stable as they pretended. Maybe loneliness has started speaking in rooms where ego used to feel powerful. However it happened, something punctured the protection pride was giving them. And now, without that shield, the truth feels sharper. Now, without that shield, they can no longer avoid the realization that they mishandled a person who was genuinely for them in ways they did not know how to appreciate at the time. The fourth hidden reason this apology is coming now is because they are testing whether your energy is still available to them. This is the part many people do not want to admit because it sounds harsh, but it is real. Not every apology is only about guilt. Sometimes it is also about access. Sometimes people apologize because they want to see whether they still have a route back in. They want to know whether your heart is still soft toward them. They want to know whether enough time has passed for the damage to be negotiable. They want to know whether they can re-enter with humility and receive warmth before they have demonstrated true change. They want to know whether your compassion can be activated before your discernment fully arrives. That is why some apologies come with emotional language, but very little structural accountability. They will say they miss you, but not fully describe the pattern. They will say they were wrong, but speak in vague terms. They will say they have changed, but offer no evidence of sustained transformation. They will come in with tenderness, vulnerability, even tears, but they will still be quietly measuring your receptivity. They will be listening, not just to express remorse, but to assess whether the old bond still lives in your response. Is the warmth still there? Is the loyalty still there? Is the emotional door still unlocked? Can they still reach you? Can they still move you? Can they still get near the version of you that once gave freely? This is why you must stay grounded when the apology comes, because sometimes the words are sincere, but the deeper motive is still mixed. The fifth hidden reason they are apologizing is because your growth has become undeniable, and it is confronting them. Chosen one, there is something powerful about being the one who was hurt and still rose. There is something powerful about being the one who was mishandled and still healed. There is something powerful about being the one who was left in confusion and still found clarity without them. And whether they see it directly or feel it energetically, this person can sense that you are no longer where they left you. They can sense that you have changed. They can sense that your energy is more guarded, more centered, more peaceful, more self-respecting, more discerning, more spiritually anchored than it was before. They can sense that they no longer have the same access to your mind, your emotions, or your sense of identity. And that realization creates urgency, because now they are not only facing what they did, they are also facing the possibility that they no longer have the power they once assumed they had. They are facing the possibility that you really did outgrow the confusion. They are facing the possibility that your healing became permanent. They are facing the possibility that the version of you who once waited, once over-explained, once carried the burden of understanding them, no longer exists in the same way. And when people realize they may have truly lost access to someone who once loved deeply, they often rush toward apology, not only because they feel conviction, but because they feel time closing in around their options. Now listen carefully, because this is where all 5 reasons begin to connect. Your absence grew loud. Their guilt wanted relief. Life humbled their pride. They wanted to test access. Your growth confronted them. All of these forces are working together underneath the apology. That is why the apology may sound emotional, urgent, and deeply felt. And to be clear, some of that emotion is real. Some of that urgency is real. Some of that regret is real. But real emotion does not always mean clean motive. Real regret does not always mean readiness. Real tears do not always mean real capacity. And that is what wise chosen ones must never forget. You have to stop treating apology as final proof of transformation. Apology is not final proof. Apology is an opening statement. It is data. It is revelation. It is information. It tells you something has shifted, yes. It tells you they can no longer fully hide behind silence, yes. It tells you the truth has started pressing on them, yes. But it does not yet tell you whether they are safe. It does not yet tell you whether they are consistent. It does not yet tell you whether they have the maturity to sustain what they were once too careless to protect. You only learn that through time, through observation, through fruit, through accountability, through patterns that remain changed even after the emotional intensity of the apology has faded. And that is why I need to say this next part with force. Do not let delayed validation intoxicate you. Do not let the sound of, "I'm sorry," pull you out of the wisdom you fought so hard to build. Do not let the fact that they finally see it become more important than the fact that you had to survive not being seen. Do not let one emotionally charged moment erase the long season where you had to heal without them, understand without them, rebuild without them, and reclaim your worth without them. The apology matters, yes, but your healing matters more. The apology may feel like confirmation, but confirmation should not become compromise.
For many of you, this is the first time the scales are truly falling from their eyes. They are starting to understand that what they called space may have been avoidance. What they called protecting themselves may have been selfishness. What they called doing what was best may have actually been emotional immaturity dressed up as wisdom. They are starting to realize that they benefited from your emotional labor, your kindness, your sincerity, and your grace, without honoring what those things cost you to give. They are starting to realize that they were receiving something precious while behaving casually. And the realization is painful. It is embarrassing. It is confronting. It shakes the identity. It forces a person to revisit not just what they did, but who they were while they were doing it. That kind of realization can produce a strong apology. It can produce tears. It can produce long messages. It can produce surprising honesty. It can produce admissions that you once thought you would never hear. But again, do not confuse intensity with depth. Some people can speak with depth in a moment and still live without depth in a pattern. Some people can become extremely self-aware for 48 hours and then slowly slip back into familiar emotional laziness once they feel the pressure inside them has eased. This is why the next phase after the apology matters more than the apology itself. The next phase reveals motive. The next phase reveals whether they are truly prepared to repair or whether they simply needed to release what was heavy. Chosen one, the fact that this person is returning with an apology does not make you weak. The fact that part of you may still care does not make you foolish. The fact that hearing those words may move something in your chest does not mean you have failed your healing. It means you are human. It means your heart is alive. It means pain does not erase tenderness overnight, but your tenderness must now live under the leadership of discernment. Your compassion must now live under the leadership of wisdom. Your openness must now live under the leadership of truth. Because in this season, your heart cannot be the first voice to answer every knock at the door. If this word is reaching you deeply, comment discernment before emotion. Write that down exactly. Discernment before emotion. Because that is the posture that will protect you in the hour ahead. Not bitterness, not revenge, not coldness. Discernment. Calm discernment. Grounded discernment. Spirit-led discernment. The kind that can hear an apology, receive the information, and still wait before assigning meaning to it. The kind that can listen without collapsing. The kind that can tell the difference between genuine repentance and emotional hunger. The kind that can sense when a person is speaking from transformed character and when they are speaking from temporary discomfort. And now we are moving into the next layer, the layer that matters even more than the hidden reasons. Because once you understand why they are apologizing, the next question becomes even more important. What will they actually say? And how can you tell from their words whether this is true accountability or just a well-packaged emotional return? In the next part, I'm going to break down the specific signs hidden inside the apology itself, the phrases to listen for, the patterns to watch, the emotional cues that reveal whether they are truly owning the damage or subtly trying to reopen the connection without doing the deeper work. And once you hear those signs, you will never listen to an apology the same way again. Phần 3/5, Chosen One. This next part is where your discernment has to become sharper than your desire. Because many people do not return with lies that sound obvious. They return with words that sound close enough to truth to disarm the part of you that still wants to believe. They return with language that appears accountable on the surface, but if you listen carefully, you can still hear avoidance underneath it. They return with softness in their tone, but subtle self-protection in their phrasing. They return with what sounds like honesty, but not always the kind of honesty that costs them enough to be trusted. That is why you cannot just hear an apology. You have to examine it. You have to weigh it. You have to listen for what is being said, what is not being said, and what the emotional energy around the words is really revealing. The first sign hidden inside the apology is whether they speak clearly or vaguely. Real accountability becomes specific. It names what happened. It names what was said. It names what was done. It names how the other person was affected. It does not hide behind blur, confusion, or emotionally convenient generalities. A person who is truly confronting the truth says, "I know I hurt you when I disappeared. I know I made you feel disposable. I know I left you carrying confusion that I created. I know I benefited from your presence while failing to honor it." That kind of apology carries weight because it shows contact with reality. But a person who is still protecting themselves often stays vague. They say things like, "I know things got messy," or "I know I wasn't perfect," or "I know mistakes were made." Listen carefully to that energy. "Things got messy" is not the same as "I was dishonest." "Mistakes were made" is not the same as "I chose comfort over honesty and left you to carry the damage." Vagueness protects ego. Specificity reveals awakening. The second sign is whether they center your pain or center their intentions. This is subtle, but it tells you almost everything. A person who is truly taking ownership focuses on impact. They care about what you experienced, not only about what they meant. They understand that good intentions do not erase harmful outcomes. They are willing to let you define what the damage felt like without rushing to explain themselves. But a person who is still rooted in self-protection quickly starts talking about what they did not mean to do. They say, "I never meant to hurt you. I was going through a lot. I was confused. I didn't know how to handle things. It wasn't my intention." Now listen, Chosen One. Some of that may be true. They may not have intended the full level of hurt they caused. But when intention becomes the center of the apology, it often means they are still trying to soften the verdict against themselves. Real accountability can mention intention, but it does not hide behind it. It says, "Even if I was confused, I still hurt you. Even if I was struggling, I still mishandled you. Even if I didn't intend the full damage, I take responsibility for the impact." The third sign is whether they are willing to carry discomfort without trying to rush your response. This is huge. People who are apologizing for relief often want the apology to do something immediately. They want reassurance. They want a soft reply. They want to know you do not hate them. They want to know the bridge is not fully burned. They want to know there is still emotional access available. That is why some people apologize and then subtly pressure you without realizing it. They say, "I just hope one day we can move past this," or "I hope you know I really care," or "I miss what we had," or "I just wanted you to know how sorry I am because you mean so much to me." Again, some of those words may sound tender, but notice how quickly the apology starts reaching toward restoration before repair has even been proven. Notice how quickly the focus begins moving from ownership to emotional re-entry.
A person who is truly repentant can apologize and let the discomfort remain.
They can tell the truth without demanding closeness. They can own the harm without trying to control your pace of processing. They can accept that your healing may require distance even after honesty arrives. The fourth sign is whether the apology contains self-awareness or only self-pity. Chosen one, these two energies can sound similar at first, but they are not the same. Self-awareness says, I see the pattern in me that led to this. I see the pride, the fear, the emotional laziness, the inconsistency, the need for control, the avoidance, the selfishness. I see what I have been unwilling to face. Self-pity says, I've just been so messed up. I've been carrying this for so long. I've been feeling terrible. I've been punishing myself. Do you hear the difference? Self-awareness goes down to the root. Self-pity stays at the level of personal suffering. Self-awareness makes a person more trustworthy because it shows they are not only upset about the event, they are examining the version of themselves that created it. Self-pity can still be sincere, but it often keeps the spotlight on their pain rather than the pain they caused. And many chosen ones get pulled in by self-pity because your heart naturally responds to woundedness. But woundedness without accountability can still become manipulation, even when it is not fully intentional. The fifth sign is whether they acknowledge the pattern or isolate the event. This is another major one. People who are not ready for real accountability often treat the entire situation like one unfortunate moment. They apologize for the argument, for the silence, for the breakup, for the withdrawal, for the betrayal. But they frame it as one singular failure disconnected from a deeper pattern. Yet you know, and your spirit knows, that the damage was not just in one moment. It was in the repeated inconsistency. It was in the way they kept you guessing. It was in the emotional instability. It was in the way they delayed honesty. It was in the mixed signals. It was in the way your nervous system never got to rest because the environment kept shifting under you. A person who truly understands what happened will not just apologize for the final incident. They will acknowledge the pattern they created. They will acknowledge how their instability, avoidance, ego, or selfishness built an atmosphere that slowly wore down your peace over time. And this is where many of you are going to need to stay very grounded, because some apologies are going to sound almost perfect. They will say many of the right things. They will mention details. They will sound emotional. They will sound broken open. They will sound unlike themselves. And part of you may say, this has to mean something. This has to be real. This has to be the breakthrough. But listen carefully to what I am about to say. A powerful apology does not always mean a powerful transformation. Sometimes it means they are having a powerful moment. There is a difference. A moment can be real and still temporary. A realization can be real and still incomplete. A person can become deeply honest in one conversation and still not have the discipline, humility, consistency, and self-government to live differently over time. This is why the apology is the beginning of discernment, not the end of it. Now let me go even deeper, because there are phrases many people use when they are sorry, but not yet surrendered. They say, I was scared. Maybe they were. They say, I didn't know how to handle this. Maybe they did not. They say, I was overwhelmed. Maybe that is true. They say, I thought I was doing the right thing. Maybe that was the story they told themselves. But all of these phrases can still function as emotional cushions if they are not paired with direct ownership. I was scared is incomplete unless it becomes, I was scared and I made you pay the price for my fear. I didn't know how to handle it is incomplete unless it becomes, I didn't know how to handle it, so I chose avoidance and left you in pain I should have had the courage to address. I was overwhelmed is incomplete unless it becomes,
I was overwhelmed, but instead of communicating honestly, I withdrew in a way that made you feel rejected and unseen. Do you see the difference? One version informs,
The other version owns. One describes an emotional state. The other takes responsibility for the damage created by that state. That is why wise chosen ones listen for completed truth, not partial truth. Partial truth can sound very moving because it reveals just enough vulnerability to trigger compassion. But completed truth goes further. Completed truth says not only what happened inside me, but what I did with it, how it affected you, why it was wrong, and what I am doing to make sure it does not repeat. Completed truth costs something. It lowers the ego. It removes the excuse. It stops asking you to decode. It stops asking you to be the one who understands everything on their behalf. And if you have spent a long time in dynamics where you were always the one translating other people's emotional confusion into meaning, then you know exactly why this matters. You are not here to finish their apology for them. You are not here to interpret half-truths and call that closure. You are not here to do emotional labor for somebody trying to re-enter your life with incomplete ownership. The next sign is whether they are apologizing because they see your worth or because they feel your absence. These two are not identical. Feeling your absence can make a person emotional, nostalgic, even desperate. It can make them miss your comfort, your energy, your availability, the way you made them feel seen, safe, admired, or emotionally regulated. But seeing your worth goes beyond missing what you gave. Seeing your worth means recognizing who you are, what you carried, how you showed up, how deeply you loved, and how carelessly that was handled. A person can miss your presence and still not truly honor your personhood. A person can miss access without fully understanding your value. That is why some apologies sound like longing more than accountability. They sound like, "Life hasn't felt the same without you. I miss our bond. Nobody understands me like you did. I realize now what we had was rare." Again, some of that may be true. But longing is not the same as honor. Missing what you received is not the same as repenting for how you treated the giver. And here is another sign you must watch closely. Whether they make room for your truth, or whether they subtly edit your reality while apologizing. Some people apologize, but they still cannot tolerate the full version of your experience. So they apologize in a way that leaves out the worst parts. They say enough to sound remorseful, but not enough to surrender control of the narrative. They might admit they hurt you, but still resist language that reflects the depth of the wound. They might say they were inconsistent, but not that they were emotionally manipulative. They might say they were confused, but not that they kept you in confusion to preserve their comfort. They might say they handled things badly, but not that they were selfish, prideful, cowardly, or careless in ways that deeply destabilized you. This is why your spirit matters. Sometimes the biggest clue is not in what they say, but in what they cannot yet bring themselves to fully name. Chosen one, by now you can feel why this matters so much. The apology itself is only one layer. The deeper layer is the architecture of the apology. What is holding it up? Conviction or discomfort? Humility or loneliness? Accountability or access seeking? Reverence for your worth or panic at your distance? And before you let your heart assign meaning to the return, you must understand the structure underneath it. Because many people are most persuasive not when they are transformed, but when they are finally confronted. Confrontation can make a person sound profound. Exposure can make a person sound soft. Fear of loss can make a person sound awakened. But only time can reveal whether awakening has become embodiment. This is why your response must not be immediate just because their message is emotional. Let them speak. Let them finish. Let silence exist after the apology. Let the dust settle. Let your nervous system come down before you decide what anything means. Some of you are going to receive long paragraphs. Some of you are going to get a voice note with trembling words. Some of you are going to receive a sudden, direct statement after months of nothing. Some of you will be caught off guard by how vulnerable they sound. But the rule remains the same. Do not measure truth only by emotional intensity. Measure it by clarity, by ownership, by patience, by consistency, and by what happens after the words are spoken. If this is reaching you the way it needs to, comment, "I will listen with discernment." Not just hear, but listen. Not just react, but observe. Because observation is going to protect you in this next season. The old version of you might have rushed to interpret the apology as destiny, as closure, as a second chance, as proof that love won. But the healed version of you understands something deeper. The healed version of you knows that truth must be tested. The healed version of you knows that apology is not a rival. The healed version of you knows that a person must be able to hold accountability after the emotional moment passes, not only during it. And that is exactly where we are going next. Because in the next part, I am going to show you what happens after the apology, and why that stage reveals more than the apology itself ever could. I am going to break down the post-apology behaviors that expose whether this person is truly changing, temporarily emotional, spiritually convicted, or simply afraid of losing access forever. And once you understand that stage, you will know how to respond without confusion, without haste, and without handing your healing back to someone who has only just begun to feel what they did. Phần 4 trên 5, Chosen One. Now we come to the part that reveals more than the apology ever could. Because almost anyone can have an emotional moment. Almost anyone can feel loss, feel guilt, feel pressure, feel regret, and say words that sound profound when the weight becomes too heavy to ignore. But what happens after the apology tells the truth? What happens after the apology is where the mask falls, where the motive becomes visible, where the difference between conviction and craving, between repentance and regret, between transformation and temporary emotion begins to show itself. This is the stage where wise chosen ones stop listening only to language and start watching structure. Because structure reveals what a speech can hide. The first thing you must watch after the apology is whether they become patient or restless. A truly accountable person understands that your timeline is not theirs to control. They understand that honesty does not obligate immediate closeness. They understand that even if they tell the truth beautifully, they are still speaking into damage that took time to create and may take time to process. So they stay patient. They do not pressure. They do not rush. They do not subtly punish you for being cautious. They do not act as though vulnerability now entitles them to access again. They allow space. They respect your pace. They make room for the reality that your nervous system may not trust what your ears just heard. And that trust has to be rebuilt in reality, not merely described in words. But the person who apologized mainly from discomfort often becomes restless very quickly. They want the emotional tension resolved. They want to know where they stand. They want reassurance that they are not the villain forever. They want signs that their honesty worked. They want to know whether they are being let back in. And if that reassurance does not come fast enough, their energy starts changing. Suddenly the softness becomes confusion. The humility becomes defensiveness. The patience becomes subtle frustration. The tenderness becomes distance again. Why? Because what they wanted most was not truth for truth's sake. What they wanted was relief. What they wanted was movement. What they wanted was to ease the pressure inside themselves. And when your caution prevents that relief from arriving quickly, the deeper motive gets exposed. This is why patience is one of the clearest post-apology tests. If they can tell the truth and then stay steady, respectful, and grounded without forcing the next step, that says something. If they can own the harm and then allow your process without acting offended by it, that says something. If they can sit with the discomfort of not being instantly trusted, instantly forgiven, instantly welcomed, that says something. But if they become emotionally unstable the second they do not get the response they hoped for, then that also says something. It tells you they may have been more attached to the outcome of the apology than to the integrity of the apology itself. The second thing to watch after the apology is whether they remain accountable when there is no emotional reward. This is a deep one. Some people can sound transformed while the conversation is intense, while the tears are flowing, while the emotions are high, while the possibility of reconnection still feels alive in the air. But what happens when the emotional heat dies down? What happens when the conversation gets quieter? What happens when there is no immediate warmth coming back from you? What happens when they do not get the response that confirms their preferred image of themselves? A person who is truly changing remains accountable even when there is no reward attached to it. They do not need to be soothed in order to stay honest. They do not need to be comforted in order to keep telling the truth. They do not need to feel welcomed in order to continue respecting your reality. This is where many people failed the test. When the emotional reward disappears, so does the depth. They become less consistent. They stop checking in with the same humility. They stop speaking with the same clarity. They start acting as though the apology should have wrapped everything up. They start implying, sometimes without words, that because they already said sorry, the burden should now be off them. But real accountability is not a performance you finish. It is a posture you maintain. It is a willingness to keep honoring the truth, even when the truth does not immediately get you what you want. The third thing you must watch is whether their behavior changes in a way that costs them something. Chosen one, this matters more than dramatic language. Transformation always costs something. It costs ego. It costs convenience. It costs old habits. It costs the emotional shortcuts a person used to take. It costs the right to remain vague, avoidant, inconsistent, selfish, or casually entitled. So after the apology, ask yourself this: what are they willing to actually change? Are they becoming clearer in communication? Are they becoming more stable? Are they becoming more honest before being confronted? Are they showing up differently in ways that are not merely verbal but structural? Are they taking responsibility without having to be pulled into it? Are they acting with the kind of humility that would have prevented the damage in the first place? Because if nothing changes that costs them, then you are not looking at transformation. You are looking at emotional expression. And emotional expression can be real without being sufficient. Tears are not a cost. Missing you is not a cost. Feeling bad is not a cost. Saying the words is not the full cost. The true cost is the death of the old pattern. The true cost is the surrender of the part of them that once prioritized self-protection over your peace. The true cost is discipline. The true cost is consistency. The true cost is truth-telling before discomfort forces it. The true cost is becoming safe where they were once destabilizing. The fourth post-apology sign is whether they make room for your boundaries or quietly resist them. This one reveals motive faster than almost anything else. A person who truly understands the damage they caused will respect the boundaries your healing now requires. They will not treat your caution like punishment. They will not call your discernment coldness. They will not weaponize your tenderness against you by acting hurt that you are not immediately open. They will understand that access has to be earned differently now, if it is earned at all. They will understand that the old assumptions no longer apply. They will understand that your "not yet" is not cruelty. It is wisdom. But a person who still wants access more than they want truth often struggles with boundaries. Even if they do not say it directly, you can feel the resistance. They want quicker replies. They want more openness. They want a softer tone. They want signs that they are being emotionally welcomed back. They may not say, "You owe me closeness," but their energy starts leaning that way. They become disappointed that honesty did not immediately restore intimacy. They become confused that your heart is not as available as it once was. They want the benefits of reconnection before they have demonstrated the maturity required to sustain it. And when a person resists boundaries after an apology, what they are really revealing is that they still feel entitled to comfort they have not rebuilt the trust to receive. The fifth sign is whether they continue telling the truth when it makes them look worse, not better. This is the mark of serious change. Many people can admit just enough to appear deep. Many people can confess in a way that still preserves a favorable version of themselves. Many people can sound self-aware while quietly curating the image. But a truly humbled person becomes willing to tell the kind of truth that costs them image. They stop only confessing what sounds noble. They stop only admitting what already feels safe to admit. They become willing to say, "I was selfish. I was avoidant. I wanted control. I kept you in confusion because clarity would have required courage I did not have. I used your patience to buy time while I stayed emotionally divided. I let you carry consequences for choices I was making." That kind of truth is not pretty, but it is clean. That kind of truth does not just seek relief, it seeks reality. This is one reason the post-apology stage matters more than the apology itself. Because over time, people reveal what kind of truth they are actually able to live inside. Some can visit truth, but they cannot remain there. Some can touch humility, but they cannot stay low enough for long enough to become different. Some can speak honestly when they are desperate, but once the desperation fades, the old self starts rebuilding its defenses. And this is why you, chosen one, must stay anchored after the apology, not just before it. The danger does not end when the words arrive. In some ways, that is when the real discernment begins. Now, let us go deeper into a subtle trap many chosen ones fall into. Sometimes, after receiving the apology, the heart begins rewriting the story in real time. Suddenly, because they finally said what you needed to hear, your pain starts feeling more bearable. Your memory starts softening the sharpest parts. You start remembering their potential more than their pattern. You start focusing on the apology as proof that the whole thing meant more than it seemed. And while some of that is natural, it can also become dangerous if you are not careful. Because one honest conversation can become a kind of emotional anesthesia. It can numb your memory of the instability just enough for you to lower your guard before safety has actually been established. This is why I need to tell you plainly, never let the apology become bigger than the pattern. Never let the apology become more sacred than your healing. Never let one emotionally significant moment erase the long sequence of smaller moments that trained your nervous system not to trust them. If the pattern was confusion, then clarity must be consistent. If the pattern was inconsistency, then steadiness must be demonstrated. If the pattern was avoidance, then directness must become normal. If the pattern was selfishness, then consideration must become visible. You do not heal a pattern with a paragraph. You do not reverse instability with one vulnerable night. You do not rebuild trust because the words were beautiful. Trust is rebuilt by repeated contact with a new reality. And this is why some of you are going to need to hear something that may feel strict, but will save you much confusion. You are not required to decide the future in the same moment you receive the apology. You are not required to know immediately whether this is closure, caution, reconciliation, or simply revelation. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to let the moment settle. You are allowed to say, "I hear what you are saying, and I need time." You are allowed to refuse to perform instant emotional clarity just because someone finally gathered the courage to speak. Wisdom often moves slower than emotion, and in this season, slower may be safer. Some of you will feel tenderness rise when the apology comes, and that is not failure. Some of you will feel anger rise, and that is not failure either. Some of you will feel sadness for what could have been. Some of you will feel a strange peace. Some of you will feel nothing at first, and then get hit later. Whatever you feel, let it pass through wisdom before it becomes a decision. Because feeling is information, but it is not always instruction. Emotion can tell you that something mattered. It cannot by itself tell you whether something still belongs in your future. And that brings us to one more major post-apology sign: whether they honor your humanity or whether they are mostly responding to their own panic. A person who is sincerely changing sees that you are not just a source of comfort, not just a role in their story, not just a lost opportunity, not just a person they hurt. They begin to recognize your humanity. They recognize the nights you endured, the confusion you carried, the rebuilding you had to do, the dignity you had to reclaim, the trust you had to restore within yourself. They recognize that they interrupted something sacred in you, and because they recognize that, they move with reverence. They stop approaching you casually. They stop acting as if the bond can be revived on the strength of emotion alone. They approach with care, because now they understand that your heart is not simply a place they miss, it is a place they once mishandled. But when a person is mostly responding to panic, their focus stays on urgency. They feel the loss. They fear the distance. They do not like the idea that you may truly move on. They do not like realizing that they may not be able to reclaim what they once had easy access to. And so, their energy becomes intense, but intensity is not the same as reverence. Panic can sound passionate. Panic can sound poetic. Panic can sound deep. But panic is still centered on what they are afraid of losing, not on the dignity of what they once failed to protect. If this word is reaching you right now, comment patterns over promises, because that is what is going to keep you safe in the days ahead. Patterns over promises. Structure over sentiment. Fruit over feelings. Not because you have become cold, but because you have become wise. Not because you do not believe people can change, but because you now understand that real change has texture, cost, humility, and duration. It is not measured by how powerful the apology feels in the moment. It is measured by how different life around that person becomes over time. And now, chosen one, we are ready for the final part. Because once you know why they are apologizing and how to read what happens after, there is one final question left. What is heaven actually doing through all of this? Why is this being allowed now? Why is this person being moved to speak now, after all this time, after all this silence, after all this delay? In the final part, I am going to show you the deeper spiritual reason this apology is surfacing now, what this moment is truly meant to confirm in you, and why the real victory may not be what most people expect.